Alright everyone, so today we're going to be talking about points, lines, planes, rays, those types of things. So let's just go ahead and get into it. We're looking at naming each of these geometry terms. Just how do we name them? So first let's look at how you name a point in geometry. Okay, so a point is simply just a dot, a location in space that has no size or shape. And we use just usually a dot to represent a point. So you can see on this shape right here, you've got multiple points. So to name a point, okay, you're just going to use the one letter that is next to that point. So we could say that the point right here is point F. Okay, of course the other point here would be point D. Okay, so these are options for points, right? So those are two different points. And you've got point S, point H, and then over here on the outside you've got point A. All right, so those are points. That's how you would label a point. Remember, the important thing is that points are labeled with one letter, just one letter for a point. Okay. Now, next thing is a line. Okay. Now, one thing to be aware of with a line is, first off, you have two letters to name a line. Okay. You've got to use two letters, and also a line is going to be going forever in both directions. But also, the important thing is that a line goes forever in both directions. Okay, so first off, if we look at the line that's on this figure, you can see right here is a line. Okay, we know that it goes forever in both directions because it has arrows. Okay, you got this arrow right here and this arrow right here. That indicates it goes forever in both directions. So in order to name this line, you just have to pick two of the points that are on the line. So we can use any 2 points. It doesn't matter which two you use. You could say DS, okay, and you could say SH, or you could say DH. Okay, any of those would work. Now, one key when you name a line is, in order to indicate that you're talking about a line that goes forever in both directions, you have to draw a line over it and put the arrows. The arrows are the key. That shows that we're talking about a line. It goes forever in both directions. Okay. Now the flip of that, the opposite of that would be a segment. Okay. So if you're talking about a line segment, now you're not going to go forever in both directions. You're going to stop. It's almost like we took the line and we just cut it right off the end. So now it's not going to go forever in both directions. It's going to stop at both ends. So again, you're going to use two letters for a line segment. So we could say line segment DS. That would be from D to S. Okay, or we could say line segment SH, and that would be going from S to H, right? Or you could say line segment DH, and that would go all the way from D to H. So it'd be a long line segment, right? So whenever you name a segment, instead of putting a line with arrows, you just put a line over it like that. Sometimes you might see dots drawn at the end of the line. Just indicates it stops and it doesn't go forever. So you could see it like that, or you could just see a line. Either way is fine. Okay, but it's important to realize lines and line segments both use two letters. The difference is that lines have arrows on them and segments don't. They just stop, or they'll have dots on them. Okay. Now, next that we'll talk about is a ray. Okay, an array is kind of half segment, half line. A ray is going to stop at one end, but then it's going to go forever on the other end. Okay, so you can, again, you got to use two letters for array. So we're going to say array would be SH. Okay, you could say array SD, or you could say array DH. Okay, now let's look at these. So rays can be a little bit more, not confusing, but just a little bit more complicated. So SH is, of course, starting at S and going to H. So it's important when you draw your line over SH that you put the arrow on the right letter. So because the arrow over here is closer to the H, I'm going to put my arrow on the side that H is on whenever I name the ray. Okay? So that's SH. Now, if I said SH, but I put the arrow this way, well, that's saying start at H and go forever through S. So that's two different things. That's saying we're going to start at H and we're going to go forever through S. All right. So with rays, when you switch the arrow to the other side, it makes two different rays. Okay, it's important those are two different things. Now with segments and lines, you know switching them doesn't matter. It's not going to change it. You can switch the letters around. And, SD is the same as DS, SH is the same as HS, DH is the same as HD. We're talking about lines and about segments. But if we switch the letters around and leave the arrow the same, okay, let's say we switch the letters and said HS, but the arrow's still going this direction. Well, that's different than in SH because this is saying start at H and go through S. This is saying start at S and go through H. Okay, so it's important to be aware of that with rays. So the same thing with SD, you could say start at S and go to D, or you could say start at D and go to S. You could say start at D and go through H, or you could say start at H and go through D. Either way is an option when you're talking about naming rays. But for lines and segments, switching the letters doesn't matter. For rays, it does. Okay. Then last couple things to talk about is, let's talk about opposite rays real quick since we already talked about rays. An opposite ray is when you have two rays, okay, two rays, and one goes one direction and one goes the opposite direction. So for this picture right here, we could say two opposite rays would be SH and SD. Okay, because they both have the same starting place at S, but they're going in complete opposite directions. Now, it's important to realize that this would not be an opposite ray with either of these because it doesn't go in the exact opposite direction. It has to go literally in the exact opposite direction. Just like if you were running away from someone and they were running away from you, they would go in completely different directions. So we could say SD and SH. Start at S and go to D. Start at S and go to H. So whenever you have opposite rays, that means you have two rays. Okay, so your answer for naming opposite rays is two different rays because they're going to be rays that go opposite directions from each other. Okay, and then to name a plane. Okay, so far, let's recap a little bit. For a point, you use one letter. For lines, segments, and rays, you're going to use two letters. Okay, for naming a plane, you have to use three letters. Now, what a plane is a two-dimensional surface. Think of a sheet of paper. Right, you can see an example of a plane right here. This entire thing is a plane. Okay, and it's also important to realize that a plane goes on forever also. Even though it looks like this stops, planes never end. So that flat surface is going to go out to the sides forever. So when you name a plane, you need to pick 3 points that lie on the plane. That's key. They have to be on the plane. All right. So we could pick any of the 3 that are on the plane, F, D, S, or H. One point we cannot use is the point A. A is not on the plane. So we can use F, D, S, D, S, H. Any of those would work. So let's just say D, S, H. Now to indicate we're talking about a plane, you just kind of have to draw your best plane over here. It can be like a square, kind of a slanted square, and that represents a plane. So plane DSH. You could say plane FDS. Okay, any 3 of those 4 letters that are in the plane will work. All right, now sometimes you'll see a plane, you might see a plane, and it might just have another letter written on it right here, but that letter is not near a point. Okay, so notice how there's no dot near the R. So that R is labeling the plane as plane R. Okay, because there's no point right there next to R. That's just a name for the plane. So that's another way you can name a plane. You can just say plane R. Because R is not a point right there. There's no dot. R is a letter that's labeling that plane. Now F over here, F has a dot. So that's one of the points that we would pick with 2 other points to name the plane. But where R doesn't have a dot, you would just say plane R. All right, let's move on. Okay, so let's see if you guys can practice here real quick. Do your best, try to name 3 points, name 3 lines, and try to name this plane in 3 different ways. Go ahead and pause the video and give those a try. So there are 6 different points you could have picked, A, B, C, D, and F. All you have to do is name 3. So if you pick any 3 of those, then that's right. Remember, with points, you just pick one letter to name a point. Okay, and then it says name 3 lines. So you can see your 3 lines right here. Right here's one line. Right here is another line that you could name. And then you've got a third line that's going straight up through the middle of the plane. So you could have named any of those 3 lines. There's multiple ways to name them. So for example, the blue line we have right here, you could use ED, which is what I used. Right? You could use EF or FD. Okay, and of course the letters for a line, they could switch. Right? You could, if you said ED, you could also say DE. If you said FD, you could also say DF. It doesn't matter which order the letters are when you're naming lines. Okay, so if you had any of those 2 letters on the blue line, that's going to name that line. But remember, you have to put the arrows over top of it to indicate you're talking about a line. So if you didn't have that, then it would be kind of wrong. Then the green line, you could say CB, BC, CF, FC, BF, or FB. And then for the red line, you could say AF or FA. So there's those 3 lines. Those are the ways to name them. And then name the plane in 3 ways. Again, to name a plane, you have to pick 3 letters, right? So a point's 1 letter, a line's 2. A plane, you got to use 3 letters, unless you're using the letter that is naming the plane itself. So you notice up here we have R, like we talked about a second ago. That R is not next to a point, so it means it's labeling that plane as plane R. So we could just say plane R is one way to name it, or you could pick 3 of the points that are in the plane. So you've got plane, pick any 3 of these points down here, plane BCD, plane EFB, CFD, any of those 3. The one point that you could not use is there's a point A. Okay, you wouldn't want to use point A to name the plane because it's not in the plane. It's floating above the plane, and if you can't really tell that by looking at the picture, notice the dotted line. Okay, this dotted line right here is dotted because it's underneath the plane. You're looking at the line, you're looking through the plane at the line to see this this dotted portion right here. All right, so that's showing you that this line is going down through the middle of the plane. It goes right there, bam, it goes through the middle of the plane, and then now it's behind the plane, and then you see it poke out of the bottom. So that's showing you that A is floating up above the plane somewhere. It's not located inside the plane. So be aware when you see that dotted line that is probably indicating a line going through the plane. So can't use A to name the plane. All right, moving on, let's practice naming 3 line segments, 3 rays, and 2 sets of opposite rays. Remember, segments and rays also use 2 letters, just like lines, but what you put above the letters is going to be different. So give those a try. Look back at the other slide if you need to, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so 3 line segments. You could say EF, BC, or AF. There's a lot of other ones that are possible. Basically, any 2 letters that are connected, you could pick them. Just make sure above the letters you don't put any arrows. Okay, then name 3 rays. So I said ED, and you might not notice ED right off the bat, but because you say, oh, well, he's got an arrow right here with it. Well, it doesn't matter. You can always start at E and go through D forever like that if you wanted to. Okay, it doesn't have to be point F that you start with to make a ray. But you can say FB, okay, which I have right there, or you could say CB. So you can start at C and then go through B forever. Those are 2 different rays, FB and CB, because this section right here is used with CB and it's not used for FB. Okay, so those are 2 different rays. Then 2 sets of opposite rays. You are kind of limited right here. You pretty much, your only choices are to say FE and FD are opposite rays. So they start at the point F and go in opposite directions. And then you'd say FC and FB are opposite rays because they start at the same point and go in opposite directions. Okay, opposite rays cannot overlap. Okay, you can't say, you wouldn't want to say that like E, D, and D, E are opposite rays. Okay, because they have too much overlapping space in there. They have to start at the same point. Okay, so that's important. Opposite rays, they've got to start at the same spot. All right, let's move on and talk about collinear and coplanar. Okay, all collinear means, think of a co-pilot. Co-pilots are 2 people that pilot the plane together, right? They work together to fly the plane. Or co-captains. You think of like the co-captains on a team, a football team or cheerleading squad, whatever. They're captains together, right? They work together. So collinear, notice the root word there is line. Okay? So collinear means that they're on the same line. They're working together to make a line. So when you're naming 3 points that are collinear, you need to pick 3 points that are all on the same line. A lot of options. You could say N, A, and B, right? Those are all on the same line. So again, since we're naming points, right, it says name 3 points. We're using one letter to name each point. So we're saying point N, point A, and point B. Okay, you could also say point D, A, and H, right? That's another option. Okay, so it says name 3 points. Either one of those would be correct answers, and there's a lot of other correct answers, but those are 2 ways you could answer that question. Now, I also said name 3 points that are not collinear. So we need to pick 3 points that do not necessarily lie on the same line. So any 3 that are not on the same line would work. You could say D, B, and H. Again, we're naming points, so we use one letter for each point. D, B, and H are not on the same line. You could say D, A, and B, because D and A are on the same line, but B is not, right? They've got to all 3 be on the same line to be collinear. And right there, D and A are collinear, and A and B are collinear, but D, A, and B are not collinear, okay? So that's how you name collinear and name collinear points. Coplanar points, exactly the same idea when we're talking about a plane. So you want to name 3 sets of coplanar points, means points that are on the same plane. All right. So pick any 3 points that lie on the plane, and this is kind of similar to naming the plane. You just want to find 3 points that are on it, and those are coplanar. So point C, point F, point D. Those are all on the plane. So you could say C, F, and D are coplanar. Right? You could also pick 3 different ones. You could say E, F, and D. Now, not only are E, F, and D coplanar because they're all on the same plane, but they're also collinear, right? Because they're all on the same line. So those are both coplanar and collinear. And then you can pick a third one, say B, F, and E. Those 3 points are also coplanar. Okay? So coplanar, pretty simple. They got to all be on the same plane. You wouldn't want to use point A because it's not on the plane with all the other points. All right. Last thing we'll talk about is a little bit more with planes. So first of all, how many planes are there on a cube? I'm going to give you some time to think about that, and then we will go over it. Right, there are 6, right? 6 planes on a cube. You got the front, back, left, right, top, and bottom. How many vertices are on the cube, right? So a vertice is basically a corner. So if you count the corners, you should count 8. Should be 8 vertices. Shade the plane that contains points B, C, F. Okay, so figure out what plane that would be. So find the points B, C, and F. Let's find those B, C, and F. What's the plane that has all 3 of those points on it? Well, it's this right plane, right? So you've got this plane right here. That would be the plane that has points B, C, and F. Is that right side? All 3 of those are on the right. All right, now name the left side of the cube 2 different ways. So if we wanted to name this left side over here, let me highlight that left side. Okay, if you want to name that left side, remember that's a plane. You name a plane with 3 letters. So you would pick any 3 letters that are on that left side. Our letters over there are A, E, H, and D. So you pick any of those 3 to name it. So we could say A, E, D. Right, that's plane A, E, D. Or you could say plane and pick other points, H, E, D. Okay, any of those work as long as you pick 3 of those 4 points. What's another point that is coplanar with plane DCA? So remember, coplanar means on the same plane. So let's find plane DCA. All right, DCA. Okay, well that plane is a plane on the bottom, right? So what is the other point that's on that plane besides the points D, C, and A? Well, it's right here. It's B. So that would be the other point that is coplanar, B point B. And the front plane two different ways. So the front, our front plane, right here. So again, you just pick three of those four letters, A, E, F, and B. See that better? A, E, F, and B, so pick any of those three. So you could say plane A, E, F, or plane B, E, A. All right, so that'd be two ways you could name it. Okay. All right, that's it for points, lines, and planes for now. Go ahead and you can practice this, and appreciate your all's attention.